Okay, Travis, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the next session talking about the Rocky Mountain Restoration Initiative. Want to welcome you all to the 2020 Colorado Water Congress Winter Convention. I hope you find this panel discussion thought-provoking. I hope you find it stimulating. We have some great an all-star panel here to share with you about a new approach to Western forest restoration. As you know, if you've been in Colorado for any length of time, the landscape has changed. We've had a beetle kill epidemic, we've had drought, we've had fires, we've had post-fire impacts. Whether you're a water provider for a municipality or an irrigator for agriculture or a recreationist, you understand, and we've all witnessed the change of our federal lands and our landscape. The Colorado Water Congress Board of Directors has made forest health and the discussion about forest health a top priority. So I'm pleased to be here this morning with this all-star cast of panelists. And I'd like to make some quick introductions here. We have Jennifer Emberly, U.S. Forest Service Region 2 Forester. Welcome, Jennifer. She has a long history, a long, I'm not going to read the whole bio, Jennifer.
Not that long, right, though?
Well, you're too young to be that long.
You like my backhanded compliment?
But we welcome Jennifer to Colorado. She comes to us from California. She has embraced this new idea that we're going to share with you. We also have Tom Spiezzi from the National Wild Turkey Federation, and Tom is the Senior National Partnership Director. Tom is a lifelong native from Salida, Colorado, had a great career with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. He's a biologist by trade. So Tom, welcome. We have Mike Lester, the Colorado State Forester, with us here today. Mike is going to share his perspective about what has happened to Colorado forests. We also have Tim Mock from DNR. Tim is the current Deputy Director. Tim is also a lifelong resident of Colorado. He's a two-time Clear Creek County Commissioner. Tim is going to share with us his personal perspective of the role of not only Colorado, but what county commissioners are faced with our changing landscape. And we have Jason Lohan, who is going to share from the Regional 2 Forest Office. He is the program director for the Rocky Mountain Restoration Initiative. Jason has spent time with the Nature Conservancy. I just described Jason. He's a fire expert, and he's going to share with us about what's next for the Rocky Mountain Restoration Initiative. So I'm glad you're here. You might have lots of questions. Well, what's up with a new initiative? And I'm excited to tell you about the opportunity that Colorado has for this national partnership. And with that, Tom Spiezzi, I'm going to turn it over to you. Welcome to the Colorado Water Congress.
Very good. Thank you, Travis. Good morning, everyone. My job this morning, right after breakfast, is always tough. I want to start with trying to introduce you to the Rocky Mountain Restoration Initiative and where did it come from? How did it start? How is it that the Forest Service and the National Wild Turkey Federation came to Colorado to help start this new sort of groundbreaking landmark approach to forest restoration? And it really began like all good things do, in a small room, in a small conversation about a big subject. And that was in Nashville, Tennessee, just about exactly a year ago. The National Wild Turkey Federation holds its annual conservation conference and national convention and sports show in Nashville every year, and we're about to do that again the week of February the 9th. And at our national convention last year, the Chief of the Forest Service, Vicki Christensen, Secretary of Agriculture, Sonny Perdue, the CEO of the National Wild Turkey Federation, our Becky Humphreys, and other leaders within our organizations, they all gathered in a room to talk about what our successes have been in the past and what we can do going forward. And of course, all those conversations start with talking about what you've done and your track record. And for those of you that aren't that familiar with the National Wild Turkey Federation, we began in 1973 and in 1976 started a loose partnership with the U.S. Forest Service, and in 1986 we formalized that under what we call the Making Tracks Partnership. That is the longest standing NGO partnership with the Forest Service in the country. Starting in 1986, we began partnering, and this is what was talked about between the chief and our CEO. They reminisced on our almost 40-year partnership under Making Tracks and building stewardship, contracting, stewardship agreements, and currently we have over 120 stewardship contracts and agreements for forest restoration that we've accomplished across the country. Tens of thousands of acres, millions of dollars of investment, and we currently have about 50 of those contracts ongoing. And they talked about that and what that means, and the fact that NWTF, because of that, with the Forest Service, we're ranked number 4 in the country among all purchasers of commercial federal timber by volume, which is hard to believe for a wildlife advocating NGO, but that's a fact because of forest stewardship. And so they talked about all the successes across the country and in that time, but I think the most important part and relevant to this is they talked about, they meaning the Chief of the Forest Service and our CEO primarily, what can we do bigger and better somewhere in the country? And the Chief of the Forest Service, Vicki Christensen, talked about the 80 million acres that the Forest Service has identified as needing restoration across the forest, especially in the West, in the wake of all the wildfires and all the things that Travis already explained. And how can we partner and show up differently? So as that meeting in February came to a close, the Chief of the Forest Service and our CEO challenged each other. And that challenge was, let's find a place somewhere in the western states that we can show up differently, that we can bring a suite of high-level partners together that are willing to share the responsibility, help strategize, implement, and fund forest restoration under the shared stewardship umbrella that USDA launched in 2018. And as that meeting ended, the agreement was that we would find a place, we collectively, the Forest Service and NWTF, find a place across those states. So the next meeting that happened was in April of last year, and you think about everything you're going to hear about today, and this has all happened in less than a year. I met with the then Deputy Chief of the U.S. Forest Service, Chris French, their National Partnership Coordinator from Washington, D.C., Jacqueline Emanuel, our NWTF Chief of Conservation, and we sat in a room for about 4 hours with information and maps, and we looked at literally every Forest Service region in the West. And the triage was, of course, California. A lot was going on in California. We all know that. We've heard a lot about it. So we talked about Region 5. Maybe Region 5 is the place. And then we talked about the Pacific Northwest and Region 6. We talked about what we've done in Region 3 together on the Cibola National Forest in southern New Mexico. And we talked about Region 4 in Utah. But we kept coming back to Region 2. And we kept coming back to Colorado specifically. We wanted a place where the stars were aligned, where the partners were already doing great work. And, you know, me being a life resident of Colorado and having been involved in what I've been involved in for almost 40 years of a career and hanging out with Travis a lot, the first thing I threw out was, well, Colorado's a headwater state. Let's talk about that and what that really means. And the 4 major river basins that find their headwaters on forested lands that are in trouble, and we all know that need help and restoration and assurance for a long-term resiliency in those areas, and how those 4 headwaters feed the lower 19 states and the millions of people, and et cetera. And that was an easy discussion to have. And there's also partnerships already happening here at a real high level. Folks from around this room are engaged in those partnerships, and so that's kind of in the queue and already ready to go. And it became easy then to land on Colorado. And at that time, Regional Forester Brian Farabee stood up, put his hand up, and said, let us do that in Colorado. Well, we launched that from that meeting in April, and in May then, we all met for what we called a test of concept meeting, where the Chief of the Forest Service and our CEO from NWTF came together in Denver and co-convened the beginning of the Rocky Mountain Restoration Initiative, brought together a small handful, maybe a dozen partners at a real high CEO, executive director level across the private sector of water, Of course, we were very influenced by water, and in fact, if any of you have ever wondered how we brought your old board director from CWCB to the National Wild Turkey Federation, it's because we needed somebody that knew water in the headwater state, that could speak the language, that could advocate for water as one of the lead entities for what we're trying to do here and why we're trying to do it. And so we're very blessed to have Travis as part of our team. And we co-convened that meeting. We had recreation there, we had the timber industry, et cetera, and all of our state and federal partners that wanted to be part of that. And we asked the questions, the hard questions, that Jennifer Eberline is going to talk about a little bit more. I think the main thing out of that May meeting, there was a resounding, the meeting lasted from 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. and nobody wanted to leave at the end of the day. It was like, oh my gosh, we're finally talking about this. So there was this new hope, this shared synergy and energy. It was the idea that partners could come together alongside the Forest Service, share the responsibility, share in the strategy, share in the implementation, and share in the funding to make it happen at a scale never before seen in this state, or for that matter, anywhere in the West. So with that, I want to take a breath and pause. I want to bring Jennifer Eberline up now. Jennifer, if you please take us from there.
I will.
Thank
Thank you. Thanks, Tom. I'm going to stand over here for a second, one, because I left my reading glasses here, and I don't know about you guys out in the audience, but I can't see a dang thing anymore without having these on me. Also, I've got some notes that I want to make sure I hit on some of the slides. And so, Tom, I'm going to cruise us through some of this where hopefully you see that up there, that there's Becky Humphreys and Vicki Christensen. As Tom had said, starting us off together on this grand adventure that we are embarking on. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about what Tom had said, where we got all these partners together. And by the way, I'm normally from, as Travis had said, I'm normally stationed in California in the Pacific Southwest region for the Forest Service. That's Region 5. And I'll tell you, we were really watching this because we went, wow, come to California. So I'm really happy to be here filling in behind Brian Farabee as the acting regional forester, so I can participate and be a part of this totally new energy around how we come together. So some of you may be wondering, what's so different? You know, we've been working on some of these things forever, so what's the real difference about this? From my perspective, I think one thing that we really, as partners, we come together and go, hey, here's my plan. Here's all the things I want to see happening on the land, and what's yours, and what's yours, and what's yours. Let's see if we can layer them up. You know, we already have it thought out. We know what needs to be done, so let's just get together and where can we leverage each other? And that's great, and we need to keep doing that. But if we really want to make a shared difference, if we want to have shared stewardship together, we actually really need to start out with talking about what do we value. And instead of coming in with all of our values and all of our plans already kind of baked, half-baked, quarter-baked, let's come together and really figure out what do we really need to pay attention to and how do we want to organize. And that's what is the exciting thing about the Rocky Mountain Restoration Initiative, or RMRI. You're going to hear us call it that. Here we got acronyms coming. I'm from the government. We got acronyms. So, I want to share that one of the big things from my perspective is really getting together and talking about values. And one of the, and the shared values. What makes Colorado so special? You guys know it, but what is it when we really get together and make it so special? And these are the top ones that this group of about 40 people by then, I believe, came together and said, water. Water is one of the top values that we all share in this state. As Tom had said, headwaters. Colorado's headwater states, 4 major rivers, Rio Grande, Platte, Arkansas, Colorado, 17 million acre feet of water originates on national forests, and that all goes down, flows down, as you know. So it's incredibly important that we take care of the headwaters, as well as all the downstream. Water here represents 135 million people, enough water for 135 million people every year. So we got a lot riding in this state, a lot of quality of life, health, safety. Another value we had was the importance of recreation. brings $9 billion into the state, and local tax revenue is about $21 billion. I'm going to cruise through. Another shared value was wildlife. It's treasured and famous, Colorado, for its diverse and abundant wildlife in the state. Wildlife viewing, hunting, fishing, $2.7 billion per year, a part of Colorado's economy. Growing communities. As you probably have heard and seen, that this is one of the fastest growing states in terms of population in the country. Estimated 100,000 people per day come into Colorado. So how do we all share and work together to help invite and at the same time manage that growing population? As Tom and Travis and others you'll hear about, what's at risk? Certainly our forests, our values that we just said, our shared values, that's at risk. So you can see on the map here that you've got an estimated wildfire insect disease impact of about 400,000 acres per year. 400,000 acres a year is impacted by these types of threats. So if you look at that over 10 years, 4 million acres in the state on average will be impacted. So if we want to get together and start managing these threats, we have to come together and share, and we all have a stake in this. So that's what this group is really all about, Rocky Mountain Restoration Initiative. It's taking the partners, when we went through this exercise of shared values, we went through and picked out focal areas of where to have at least an initial effort and emphasis in this state. It was the Front Range, it was the Upper Arkansas, and it was the Southwest Colorado area. So all these partners came together. I think at the end it was about 140 individuals and organizations that we ended up taking a lot of time doing presentations, and this Rocky Mountain Restoration Initiative partnership selected Southwest Colorado as the emphasis area for a variety of reasons. So now it's, how do we come together now and really think about what do we leverage? What are our resources that we leverage together to make a difference on these landscapes? So again, that's where we want to spend some time over the next, here's the largest fires too, sorry. Fires in Colorado history, more than half have occurred in the last decade, so there's your risks. And that's what we're looking at. Largest, most destructive, and most costly wildfires in Colorado have occurred in the last 20 years. So our threats are real, and there's the red is the footprint of the largest fires. I was saying we've got the upper or Front Range right there. There's a footprint of the Hayman Fire. Here would be another footprint of the Hayman Fire. That's what that looks like on the Front Range if we have additional fires like that. So forested and land ownership is incredibly important for us to pay attention to. It's part of the mitigation. It's part of the health of the landscape. And here's our focal landscapes that we had as well, like I was talking about. Southwest Colorado, Central Front Range, I-70 corridor. You can see I totally got ahead of my slides, you guys. So thanks for having me get me caught up. I'm getting there. Focal area meetings is where we all came together to talk about presentations. And then again, how can we collectively invest together? How do we share the stewardship of some of these landscapes? When we look at all of those values, we had the 3 priority landscapes, we had stakeholder meetings, we had full partner meetings, we had focal area meetings. We met a lot, as you can tell. We looked at evaluation criteria together as a group, as a partner. We had decision processes. It was iterative. We went back and forth with each other. We had a timeline. And one thing I can tell you as being at least in land management is that I know some people go, wow, 9 months is really fast to do all of this. Believe me, I hear the opposite. We can't take so long to do things. So this is also a test of how do you come together within a year, as Tom was saying, that Becky and Vicki at the Turkey Federation meeting, it's 1 year later and we actually have some decisions of where we're gonna put some resources on the landscape. So Southwest Colorado was our first area. It was unanimous because it met all of the criteria, and it was really looking at a whole suite of restoration actions and activities across the landscape. It has great collaboratives that are working together. It has some social license of how do you put fire on the landscape, as well as other areas. And that's the stuff that we really don't want to see anymore. Here's the actual headlines that are out of the Denver Post and other newspapers around the state. This is what we're after. How do you not have these headlines happen? So that's what we're here together to really start to leverage our resources in a variety of ways to get our shared values, have shared stewardship on the land, and make a big difference together. Travis, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. Next, we're going to hear from our state forester, Mike Lester, his perspective about all lands, all hands, and urgency. Take it away, Mike.
Thank you, Travis. Now, by necessity, we're going to be lapping over what we're all saying because it all focuses on getting the work done. So why are we in such a hurry with this? Tom, when we were trying to get this going, and Alf was saying, slow down, he said, well, it's like we're building a bicycle while we're riding it. And in essence, we were. But what's the hurry? I think Jen got into part of it. We got 24 million acres of forest in Colorado. We've got roughly 5 million that have significant mortality. We have catastrophic wildfires, and we will always have fire, but the catastrophic part of it is something that we're trying to avoid. When you've got a situation like she's laid out, where you have these forest health issues, you start thinking about New Orleans. Now, why would you think about New Orleans? Folks, remember Katrina? The levees in New Orleans? The levees in New Orleans, folks knew that those needed to be fixed. But people kept saying, well, why now? What's the hurry? We've got time. We've got road issues. We've got school issues to fix up. We'll get to the levees. Well, something got the levees before they did, and that was Hurricane Katrina. That's why I get really nervous when people say, what's the hurry? I think we do have a hurry. I think we have a reason for being a little bit quicker than we have been in the past. Paradise, California. People say you're trying to scare people, and to be honest with you, yeah, I kind of am trying to scare people because that could happen here. The Missoula Fire Lab has said on more than one occasion that the Hayman fire at 137 million acres will probably not be our biggest fire. Where will that fire be? Well, we don't know. But the point of what we're trying to do here is saying we can't wait around. We need to get going on this. And our tradition in the past has been more of a shotgun approach. And so that's why the pace and scale is popping up as something that's very important. So when you have the Hayman fire, for example, there was some forest land that was treated that the Hayman fire hit full force. Fire went to the ground, ran through that area, and that was the area owned by Denver Water. And then once it got through, it popped back up into the ground. But the point is, that treatment saved that area. It made that fire a low to moderate intensity fire, which is what Colorado evolved around, not these high intensity catastrophic wildfires. So the urgency is we don't know when the next Hayman's going to strike. We know we've got fuels, we've got a lot of dead fuels, we know we've got wind events, we know we've got all the things that happen to make those catastrophic fires happen. And that's why we need to get going on it now. Again, in the past, we'd work with landowners. Somebody might have 40 acres here. A few miles away, they might have another 40 acres over there. When you have those catastrophic wildfires, that doesn't really stop the fire. What stops the fire is doing linked treatments so that when that fire hits, it loses its fuel and it loses its energy. That's the pace and scale piece of it. So the scale is the size of it. The pace is how fast can we get at it. We've been doing forest treatments in Colorado, at least for the State Forest Service, since 1955. We've done a lot of good work. We've had some fires where we've seen it make a difference. We had one recently at Buffalo Mountain in Summit County where $1 million worth of prevention work saved over $1 billion worth of housing and businesses and a major reservoir there. So we know this can work. But that's why the urgency is here. We have a lot of fuel out there. We have an unnatural amount of fuel. We have a lot of people out there. We have a lot of ignition sources. And we need to get to work to try to make this safer for us. So we don't have a paradise in Colorado. So that's why the urgency. That's why we need to do it now. We have some folks that have been looking at this. We have a Forest Health Advisory Council, which is a broad group of stakeholders, including several people on the stage now, who've taken a look at this for quite some time. And what Jen talked about earlier, about all these stakeholders getting together, it's all of us realizing that if we don't get on this, we're going to have some issues. Now, I do want to say that we had a lot of projects come in for this Rocky Mountain Restoration Initiative. I think we looked at 7 in the final analysis. And here's the thing. All 7 of those were excellent projects. They all demonstrated things that were important. The selection of the southwest part of the state was a difficult selection in some respects, and it was easy in other respects. Difficult because there were so many good projects, which really indicates the need in Colorado. Easy because it met so many of the important things we're trying to get in pace and scale. So but it's not like Southwest Colorado is all we're going to do. The idea with pace and scale is we hit an area with all the stakeholders, all the resources that we can, and do enough work to where we've made a difference there, where we've created a series of communities where we'll have small to moderate intensity fires, the kind of things that we can live with, we can adapt to, and we can make our communities safe. Once we get that done, then there are other things we can move those resources on to the next big project that we have. Now, having said that, all of those 7 projects who submitted their projects to be analyzed, they're not quitting. They're not waiting for us to get done with Southwest Colorado. They're moving forward. And I think we need to be supportive of that as well. But the point here is we needed to find a spot that was in need and where we had resources where we could attack this with a lot of stakeholders, make a difference, and make that community and put that in a maintenance situation so that we can move on in Colorado. Because I can tell you right now that this shotgun approach, project here, project here, project here, is not going to work. It's not going to take that community that we're trying to protect, that watershed we're trying to protect, and make it safe. We're going to have to focus our resources and make a difference over a larger area. So that's really what we're trying to do here, and that's why there's such an urgency to get this done. We don't want to be like the Ninth Ward in New Orleans where people said, what's the hurry? We don't want to be like what happened in Paradise, California, where people say, what's the hurry? Because by the time you find out why you should have been in a hurry, it's too late. So this is an excellent opportunity for leadership in this state, folks in this room, to get behind this and make a difference. And not just a difference there, but starting there and making Colorado a safer state. We've got a lot here to work for. We've got a lot here to protect. I think Jen showed all those areas, our communities, our water supply, our recreation, our wildlife habitat. These are all at risk, and if we think they're not, we're kidding ourselves. So this is what the Rocky Mountain Restoration Initiative can do for the state of Colorado. I think this is why we all need to support it, and we all need to invest in our forest and get this work done. So that's why I think it's an urgent thing to get on top of. Travis?
All right, thank you, Mike. I'm going to turn to Tim Mock, Deputy Director of DNR. And Tim, thank you for being here this morning. Share with us your perspective of the Rocky Mountain Restoration Initiative and focus in on your time as County Commissioner and as a lifelong resident of Colorado. Share with us your perspective of this great opportunity.
Thanks, Travis. It's a pleasure to be here. Good morning, everybody. Tim Mock, Deputy Director, DNR, former County Commissioner. And one of the things that keep you up as a County Commissioner is you don't know when the next catastrophic fire is going to occur. And therefore, the worst phone call you can get from your sheriff, or one of the worst, is, hey, Timmy, we've got to blaze up such and such. And as a county, with a small county with relatively finite resources, it's easy to feel powerless, especially when you live in the middle of large acres of public land and large land owners and managers. And so it's easy from that perspective then to point fingers. And I was in that camp probably when I first became a county commissioner. This is not our problem. Somebody's got to do something about that. But part of my transition into this was we had an effort that some of you might be familiar with called the Front Range Shooting Sports Partnership. And we addressed a recreational target practice going on in our forests. But we sat down in that effort on a landscape level with all of the counties in the ARNF, the Forest Service, state government, nonprofits, constituents, and we worked through an issue. And we found a way that, hey, you know, if this is all of our problems, and that's where we've got to really operate from. This is our collective problem. This is our collective backyard. And we each have unique authorities and resources to bring to bear that really, when you do that, it solves the puzzle in a very significant way. And so we are excited in my executive director, Dan Gibbs, who would love to be here, another former county commissioner. So when we came into the state positions here, we were very excited to understand shared stewardship. It was a language actually we became very familiar with. And then we kicked off RMRI. And as Mike said, we really got to get after this now. Confession, I was one of those raising their hands saying, let's do this a little bit more methodically. Let's think our way through this a little bit more. This timeline's awfully fast. But the reality is that we've got to do something. We've got to try new things, and we can't be afraid of that. And we've got to have our hands on those dials to address these challenges that we have because they are so great, they are so right now. And so we're very excited about this effort. A few weeks ago, we brought in the Southwest team, and they presented the project to numerous state government departments and divisions. And it allowed my colleagues to ask questions and find ways that, hey, with all of our divisions, whether it's DRMS, Division of Reclamation Mine, whether it's Department of Labor, we all have unique authorities and resources, and that's part of the puzzle that'll make this work. And let's focus on a large landscape level, and when we do that, we're really going to solve significant issues and challenges. And then I think this effort has already started to work. With those 7 regions that came together, a number of those had formed partnerships out of that. And again, those are large landscape regional partnerships that are so important to this. And I think that's the way, bringing that focus, bringing that priority to this challenge is something that is going to be very beneficial. So thank you, Travis.
Tim, thank you. I'm going to ask now Jason Lohan, the program director, the expert in putting the wheels behind the Rocky Mountain Restoration Initiative. Jason, thank you for being here. I want to just tee up a couple of questions. What does partner-driven mean? And your perspective of what has happened, but then most importantly, what's next and what are some of the next steps?
All right, thank you, Travis. Partner-driven. I think one of the key things with this initiative that I think is unique is that as co-conveners, the U.S. Forest Service and the National Wild Turkey Federation, we've been facilitating this process, but at each step of the way, at each decision point on what are your values, what are your shared priorities, what places are most at risk, what science should we use, all of these things, we've been asking the partners actually to lead that decision, to make that decision. And what we've found has been, I guess, not surprising, but also interesting. When you're put in a spot where the decision's really yours, you realize how hard it is to prioritize and focus. And that's been a really interesting, I guess, lesson learned out of this whole thing so far has just been that when you put people in that position, when you put people in the driver's seat, they're struggling with the same things that you are on a day-to-day basis. They're struggling with the same challenges around those incremental decisions that can have a lasting impact. And so what is partner-driven? Partner-driven for this initiative means that we've been looking to the partners really to tell us where they want to collectively focus their resources. This isn't a typical grant program that most of you would probably be familiar with. It's not a pot of money that's out there where we have criteria that are developed around how we want to spend it. This is where do we all, as a collective group of resources, a collective group of experts, want to focus our time? Where do we want to focus our energy together? And then let's come up with a plan. We asked the focal landscapes that Jen and others have mentioned, we challenged them. We said, don't organize around a dollar amount. Organize around a landscape where you have these values, that they're at risk, that you care about in your communities, and come up with a cohesive plan and tell us what it's going to take. And then let's organize around that. Let's move towards kind of what a collective outcome would look like, regardless of the cost, regardless of how much investment it would take from our different entities. So I think that in terms of partner-driven, really organizing around that outcome and then pushing those decisions and that focus into a shared space, I think is really important. So what's next? We've done a lot of work. I think we've come a long ways in a year, but it's been somewhat of a sprint so far. And I think those of us that have been really invested in it to date, we realize that this is the point where the work was actually going to begin. Despite the exhaustion, despite the pace that we've been on, now we actually have to get out there and figure out what it means to all come together between state, regional, national, and local partners and actually start to do this and actually start to develop a strategic plan, figure out what our share is, how we can contribute, whether it's time, funding, resources, capacity, and make this happen. And so right now we're in the process, as Jen mentioned, Southwest Colorado was our initial focal landscape. We've been starting to roll out with those partners and start to ask some of those hard questions. And I think that the real difference here with some of that rollout is how do we start to take those steps that when we've gone around and traveled to these communities, when we started as coming here to a state, many of you have probably heard this, but I've been asking people that have been doing this work for decades in some cases, and I say, who's ready for the next Hayman fire, for the next High Park fire, the next 416 fire? Who wants to take that fire on? If we could predict where it was going to be and we could actually push it to somebody and they could just take one for the state, like who wants it? And nobody has raised their hand. And so what we're trying to do right now in Southwest Colorado is actually come together, and in that 800,000 acre landscape, we want them to be comfortable and ready to raise their hand at the end of 10 years relative to the values of recreation and safe communities and wildlife and water in particular. We want them to be able to raise their hand and say, yeah, we're confident that, yeah, it's not going to be without impact, but it's going to be a lot better off if that fire hits here than somewhere else. And that's really what we're trying to do now in terms of those next steps. So there were other recommendations made, and I definitely don't want to look past this. There were two other landscapes, the Upper South Platte and the Upper Arkansas, that were of such importance to this group and this evaluation committee that was looking through these proposals. They said, we can't look past this. We need to find a way that we can collectively help them move forward on their goals and make progress on their initiatives. And so we just don't know what that's going to be yet. We're meeting later in February, where we're going to, again, this isn't a big pot of money that's out there and we're just distributing it. It's partners saying we want to figure out how we can invest and how we can make this happen. And so that may not mean that we're fully meeting all of the goals and filling all the bins in each of those projects, but I'm hoping that we can find a way to really support those initiatives and to help them move forward as well. And then as Mike mentioned, there are 7 total proposals that came in, and all of them in some way we're hoping that we might be able to help through some cross-cutting issues that came up in most of the proposals. How do we address workforce capacity? How do we address the funding issue across the state? How do we address wood utilization and biomass? How do we address public license to use some of the tools that we really need to use to get to scale? And we're hoping that by looking at some of those issues in more depth, that we might be able to work with other partner groups, work with other initiatives, and really help all of the projects, and even not just in the initiative, but all of the work that's happening across the state. So our next steps really now are, we're starting to roll out in the Southwest. We're going to be meeting back together as a partnership to see how we can support those other proposals that were recommended and be able to better articulate what that's going to be moving forward. And then we're going to see how to take this to the next step. Where do we go beyond this? You know, our end goal for this initiative is that we believe that organizing this way around outcomes and around values is going to raise all boats, that this is a way that we can organize around initiatives that people can get behind. And my hope would be that this starts happening whether there's a Rocky Mountain Restoration Initiative in your backyard or not, that people just start organizing this way and we start seeing outcomes and people focusing their resources around shared values and shared priorities all over the West.
Thank you, Jason. Jennifer, I'd like to come back to you and your perspective about why Colorado, the opportunity to showcase this partner-driven, what does success look like? And the spotlight is literally on us right now, but it is on Colorado and this new way, this new approach to Western forest restoration.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Travis. So why Colorado? What I can see, I've been here for a few months now, is there is such a synergy about values. There's the experience, there's sometimes the bad experience, the sorrow that comes with fire as well that everybody collectively shares. But the power of the partnerships and the relationships that you see in this state is pretty powerful. And that is one of the things that I know was one of the selection points of why Colorado in terms of any other state. But I will also say that a lot of eyes are on this nationally, that this is an experiment in a way. Not only do we want to have the successful outcome of better management, better resilience of the landscape, but it's also a test of how do we start coming together, leveraging our resources, as Jason had talked about. It's not like you have this massive amount of money that's just sitting out there waiting in a big pot and we all just apply for money for it. We've tried that and we're still going to keep doing that to a certain extent. We're not abandoning everything because we have this, but one of us can't do it alone. Even 2 or 3 together can't do this. So we've got to harness the energy of all of our partners, all of the opportunities to really get that outcome. So this is something that, at least from the Forest Service side, from our partners, from Turkey Federation, we're looking at how do you export this? This is just one state in many, we've got several others that are in the same boat, at least in the West, if not in the entire US. So how do we start looking at this and learning from it and thinking about where we can put this on other landscapes that need it as well?
Jennifer, thank you. Tim, if you would, a few moments, the perspective of we're revising the Colorado Water Plan. Basin roundtables are meeting, basin plan updates. Share with us, if you would, about forest health, what that looks like. We're a diverse state. Most of us have experienced fire or flood, and what that looks like maybe in the water plan from DNR's perspective.
Thanks. We all know how important water is. Obviously, you wouldn't be here. We know what we've invested in the planning. We know what we've invested in the technical updates. We have got to go on the offensive, and I think that's what this comes down to. Forest health is such an integral part in that water plan, and we've got to go on the offensive, and we've got to work with the basins and support the basins and the regions into identifying, developing better projects, and getting those projects the resources they need.
All right. Thank you. Tom, I'm going to come back to you and circle back, and would you share with us what's going to happen next month in Nashville and all that's taken place in this last year, and please share.
Yeah, be happy to. Thanks, Travis. I want to stand up. There's no guarantee I'll be taller than the podium when I do, but I wanted you to see me over there. I want to circle back to a year ago. I mentioned that this started with a conversation at NWTF's National Convention. During the week of February 9th, which is just a couple weeks from now, the same thing's going to happen again out in Nashville. And if you don't know much about that, The convention has over 55,000 people come through the door over about 3 days. Our conservation conference is attended by as many folks as attend this water conference from state, federal, private, NGO, tribes from across the country. And we're going to have a very robust conversation about the Rocky Mountain Restoration Initiative. We've got everybody on this stage will be out in Nashville, as well as many additional partners from Colorado going with us. We're going to stand in front of that conference. We've been asked to come there for 90 minutes and talk about this national pilot that every region in the country is looking at as the standout for how to do something different. And then in addition to that, the Secretary of Agriculture, Sonny Perdue, the Chief of the Forest Service, and our CEO, Becky Humphreys, are inviting us all on stage, and the Rocky Mountain Restoration Initiative Partnership will be recognized in front of a big audience on the big stage. So we're very excited about that, very excited to bring that information and that recognition back here. They're recognizing the partnership, but as Jason pointed out, the doing it on the ground still has to happen. You can build all the great partnerships. We've got the big heavy lift in front of us, but it takes the kind of energy and the horsepower that we're going to experience out in Nashville. It's going to be a big celebration of what our partners have accomplished to this point. It's not what NWTF accomplished, not what the Forest Service accomplished. It's what this great partnership has built and the energy that came around that. And with the spotlight for Colorado comes the, now you got to do it. Be careful what you ask for. And so we know that the light's on you to succeed or fail. It's ours to lose. We don't intend to. I've spent 63 years living in little towns in rural Colorado, from Salida to Gunnison, Pagosa, Durango, and I've watched the forests change. I've watched the climate change. I've watched the trees turn black and brown. It's time to do something. So we're going to do that.
All right. Thank you, Tom. I want to thank you all for attending here this morning. We're going to allow a few moments for questions or conversation, but I hope this has given you an update, a preview, the great opportunity for Colorado. When I talk to people about forest health, if they have not experienced a fire in their neighborhood, it's just interesting conversation. But if you have experienced a fire or post-fire impacts, you get it. So would you give a big round of applause for this all-star panel, and thank you for being good listeners. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.